Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. Today on the Leadmore podcast, the Leadmore podcast is all about helping create more leaders for tomorrow. I believe the world needs more leaders, and I believe you are one. And one thing leaders have to do, I know this sounds like nails on a chalkboard, but it's run meetings. Meetings are a part of any organization, certainly business, certainly a team, a nonprofit, a church, a group, an organization, whatever it might be. We have to have some sort of meetings, right? And of course, there's the classic joke of like that meeting could have been an email, and now maybe we'll just take the emails and let the meet. Now we all are adding our AI bots to the meetings, right? And the Zoom calls and the virtual calls, and they take notes and tell us summaries and what we're supposed to do next. And maybe next our AI bots can just meet with our other AI bots and they'll just talk to each other. I only wish. But meetings are a part of kind of group culture, team culture, a way to get people together, to get things done, to get people on the same page. So today what I wanted to talk about is what are the elements of a good meeting? Because this has come up recently in my coaching in a couple of ways. One, a partnership group that doesn't currently do a regular or consistent partner meeting, right? So my old business partner, Amy at Lemonly, we'd have a regular scheduled partner meeting. I'm guilty of sometimes canceling that meeting, which is a big no-no. So I'll admit that. But a regular partner meeting needs to exist. And so it came up with one client doing that. And the other client just felt like meetings were sort of unproductive, too long, not necessary, not enjoyable. Like they dreaded doing the meeting, right? So between these two questions and some discussion, I thought, let's do a podcast about what are the elements of a good meeting? How do we structure a good meeting? What should be in it? And how do we make them more interesting? So with that, here we go, Leadmore podcast, the 5 elements of a good meeting. Let's go. Number 1, no surprise, agenda. I always love every meeting should have an agenda. If it doesn't have an agenda, you're allowed to cancel the meeting or not attend. I know that sounds a little harsh, but what are we talking about? Why are we here? Does this meeting need to exist? Because if not, then it certainly could be an email. Now, you don't have to recreate the wheel. A couple ways that I've done this in my history with my one-on-one team meetings, I had a template called the one-on-one meeting template, and I asked my direct reports to fill out this template. So 5 minutes before that one-on-one time, I could pull it up, look at the document, get a glimpse, get an idea of what was coming up, what I was about ready to enter into. And then we just talk through it real high level, just some boxes that they'd fill out. And then they could copy paste and make a new one each week. If it's a one-on-one meeting, that meeting is for your direct report leaders. That's not for you. That's not your meeting to give that person a bunch of assignments. It's their meeting to help get unstuck, to get obstacles removed out of the way, and for you to help grow them so that they can grow the business. So every meeting needs an agenda, one-on-one agenda. We did a weekly, if you're familiar with the concept of EOS or traction, what was called an L10 meeting. And some of the elements I'm going to share with today are taken from or inspired by the L10 meeting. We used Dropbox paper, and each week that group of 5 of us would recreate that template, work off of it, fill it out, off we go. So every meeting needs an agenda. Don't just leave the same 4 bullets every time. Like if there's something, like add a couple notes, customize, personalize just a little bit. This doesn't need to take long. Work off a template, work off a shell, but every good meeting has an agenda. Bonus points, this isn't required, but bonus points, if it's a long meeting, if you want your meeting to be short, do what's called a standing meeting, literally make people stand. I know this doesn't really happen as much in the Zoom virtual world, but we used to gather in a room and stand. That guarantees your meeting will be 20 minutes or less. But if it's a longer meeting, like a working meeting where you're getting things done, bonus points is timestamps in your agenda. So like 5 minutes intro and welcome, 15 minutes what we're going to talk about next, scorecard. You could actually timestamp things. And so then if you're having a 60 or 90-minute meeting, you're sort of checking the clock, looking at your watch, making sure we're on pace so that we can be done on time or maybe even a little bit early. So number 1, agenda. Number 2, I just talked about it, scorecard. Certainly this will differ what scorecard is shared or what metrics are tracked depending on the meeting, one-on-one, team, all staff, all hands. But I think whatever your team is responsible for, the reason why you're meeting, let's get all the copywriters together. Let's get the leadership team together. Let's get you and me one-on-one together. Some sort of metric, KPI, dashboard, scorecard, whatever you want to call it, that we can quickly glance at to know how are things going. Are we green? That's good. Are we red? That's bad. Are we ahead of pace? Are we behind pace? What are we here for to solve? The meeting might be about a very specific topic or issue or person, but why are we doing it? And reminding ourselves what's the goal. This can be really quick. It can be just check in. Could be pulling up, logging into a website. Could be looking at the dashboard. But remembering why are we here and what are we ultimately trying to change or fix or grow or accelerate? That's scorecard's second element of good meeting. Number 3, I call this wins. You could probably call this highlights, maybe updates, but generally a moment or space or time set aside to talk about what's going well, to celebrate a person, to acknowledge our wins, to recognize our hard work, and to also remind ourselves that this is fun, that we're doing this together as a team, we're doing hard things. So taking this out of the business context, this is celebrating, this is Monday morning quarterback meeting and you're celebrating the win you got on Saturday, right? This is acknowledging a new record that was set by a player or a team. This is acknowledging a milestone that occurred, right? We work so dang hard. We put in blood, sweat, and tears and time. Let's enjoy it. Let's have fun while we're doing it. And that comes back to wins. Most people, teams, cultures, organizations don't celebrate their wins enough. We need to make sure to give ourselves a little bit of praise. All right, number 4. And the part I'm skipping over here, these are kind of the 5 elements of every meeting. There's probably this part right here between wins and number 4. The first part, agenda, scorecard, wins, are probably the first beginning part of the meeting. And these might even happen pretty quick. The agenda is pre-built, hopefully. Scorecard is a quick check-in and level set. The wins are sort of a way to go around the room, celebrate, make sure we're all proud of what we've done. And then you're going to move into whatever the meat of the meeting is, breaking down the new website design, talking about the new role you're going to hire, reevaluating last week's defensive performance and how you're going to get better this year or next week, looking at 2025 goals, whatever the bulk of the meeting. I'm not talking about that part today because that's custom to whatever your meeting is about. But another part, this will be moving to the back half of the meeting, 2 more elements. Number 4 is what's called cascading messages. This was one part of Traction that really transformed Lemonly. Because even though we're a small team, we were our small team, 20-ish people, who needs to know what, when, and how will they know that, right? Because sometimes what happens, regardless of team size, George knows, and George finds out from Lisa, but Lisa actually is lower than George on the org chart. And so George feels like he should have known that first, but didn't want to learn from Megan or whatever. And the way in which things are communicated can hurt feelings or can step on toes or just make things confusing. So you heard that. I heard this. Well, who did you hear it from? Do you think they know? Is that right? Well, I didn't hear it from John, though. So this is the point of cascading messages. So when you're in a meeting, if it is a change, a big announcement, some news, a milestone, a goal, who needs to know this? When do they need to know it? How are we going to tell them? And exactly what are we going to say? Let's not leave this room. Let's not leave this meeting, this Zoom call, before we all know who's going to say it, when are they going to say it, and what are they going to say? And even how. Is it an email? Is it a Zoom call? Is it a quick little Loom video, whatever it might be? That's called cascading messages. That will squash a lot of problems in your organization. If you have a gossip issue, if you have a rumors, if you have a hurt feelings, if you have a, oh shoot, that wasn't supposed to be shared, or who did you hear that from? Cascading messages will fix this. Now, the smaller an organization is, likely the flatter the org chart is. So sometimes the cascading message might be company-wide. We leave this room, we tell everybody. John sends the email. Amy shares it at the next all hands team meeting, whatever it might be. But sometimes, and especially in larger organizations, there is a need to know basis. There is that's above my pay grade. You may have heard that line before. And that's where cascading messages is clear for everybody in the call or the room: who, when, where, how, and what. That's cascading messages. The last one, number 5. This is directly off of Traction, EOS. And I suppose maybe a one-on-one meeting wouldn't need this, but for most meetings, I really like scoring the meeting. Another way to take this, if you don't want to score it, is you could go around and say, what was the most useful takeaway? Which is also a really powerful question. But some sort of feedback loop. The point here is feedback loop. We need some sort of question or validation or challenge that this meeting worked, this meeting was worth it, and how do we make this meeting better next time? So in Traction, the reason it's called the L10 meeting, the level 10 meeting, is at the end of the meeting, that leadership group will go around the room and score the meeting. We did this in Lemonly at the leadership team. I now do this in Leadership South Dakota with my nonprofit board. They're overly generous and score me very well, which I'm grateful for, but it still creates a feedback loop, a place for, hey, we ran a little bit over on time, so I want to make sure we respect the agenda next time. Hey, and this is a real story, I gave the meeting a 5. Whoa, that's really low. Why is it a 5? Because John was distracted and looked at his phone multiple times during the meeting. It didn't feel like he was valuing our time or being present. Confession, that actually happened in a Lemonly meeting. That is why a score matters. It's a mechanism to provide quick, real-time, and honest feedback. Because the way Traction says it is if it's above 7, 8, 9, 10, you score it and you move on. If it's below 7 or below, you have to explain why. So it's a 5 because John wasn't doing this. It's a 7 because, well, it was fine. I felt like we talked about the things we needed to, but didn't get a whole lot done, whatever it might be. So we built in such a feedback loop running our L10 meeting at Lemonly that even on the 8, 9s, 10s, the good meetings, 10s are hard to come by, people would still explain why they loved it. And that is so powerful for you, the leader or the facilitator of the meeting, the chair, whatever context we're talking about, to get a feedback loop for how to run your meetings better. Please do not say, well, this is the way we've always done it. It's always been 90 minutes. It's always been in this exact space room. It's always been on Zoom and never on Teams, or I don't know whatever the reasons are. Question everything. Get feedback on everything and ask why and ask how can we get better. And so number 5 is really feedback loop, whether you want to score it or you want to say, what was the most useful takeaway? What's one thing we can do better? Make sure to push it back onto the party and the group of people in the room, in the meeting, to get that feedback. All right, so to recap, what are, I think, the 5 most important elements of every good meeting? Number 1, we start with an agenda. It's planned before the meeting. Number 2, we have a scorecard, a baseline, a dashboard, something to go look at to see how we're doing. Number 3, early on in the meeting, we're going to celebrate our wins. We're going to share highlights. We're going to have announcements, make sure we can be proud of the work we're doing. Then you have the big body of the meeting. Why are you here? That's the main bulk, both in time and in effort. But we finish with number 4, cascading messages. Who needs to know what, when, where, why, and how? And number 5, feedback loop. Score it, useful, some sort of mechanism to know if it worked. So for my leaders out there, if you're listening to this, meetings are important. We can't turn every meeting into an email. There's probably some we can, but you need to have these meetings. And I encourage you to have them with some sort of regular cadence so they're expected, they're known, and we can kind of create a culture of when we can come back, especially in a virtual or hybrid world, but even in a team, a nonprofit that only meets once a month, you have a time to come together and get things done in a productive way. So we have to do meetings, and if we're going to have to do them, let's do them well, leaders. Be the type of person who runs a good meeting. That's a good reputation to have. John runs a good meeting. He keeps a tight ship. He gets things done. I like attending those meetings. I've been in a lot of meetings, a lot of bad ones, and a lot of good ones. I can tell you the good ones are much more fun. They're much more fun to show up for. And when you are attending a good meeting, you bring your best self, right? You show up, you participate, you ask questions, and you're happy to be there. So that's the element of a good meeting. All right, leaders, thanks again for tuning into the Leadmore podcast here. Remember, Leadmore podcast is about helping leaders grow. You can come back every other Thursday to get an episode of something that'll help you take something off the shelf or learn from another leader, take their framework, take my models, and plug them into your leadership journey, whether that be business, a nonprofit, a team, sports, organization, whatever it might be. I want to create more leaders, and I know that you can be one of those leaders. As always, leaders, take care and be well.